Hey Pre-Calc students, this is Mr. Mitchell here. We're going to start talking about complex numbers. We're talking about radicals and square roots and imaginaries. So here's just some examples of perfect squares and prime numbers. What is an imaginary number? It's when you take the square root of a complex number is made up of a real and an imaginary part. So here's kind of a little diagram of the different kinds of numbers that you learned in Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. It's just a breakdown. We're not going to have a test on it or anything, but it just is a breakdown of things that you will see. Let's take a look at adding and subtracting complex numbers. So when you add and subtract, you just put them together. So 4 plus 1 is 5. 7i minus 6i is 1i, or just I. For this one, you have to be careful. Make sure you distribute your negative. That's 1 minus 4 is negative 3. 2i minus 2i is 0. So 0i, or you just don't have to write it. Same thing over here. We need to distribute some negatives. So I got 3i plus 2 minus 3i minus 2 minus 5i. So put some stuff together. The 3i's cancel, the 2's cancel, and you just get negative 5i. Over here, the only one you have to distribute is this. This is going to be negative 7 minus I, so just be careful. So I got 3 plus 4 is 7. Minus 7 is 0. And I got 2i minus I minus I is 0. Now we're going to multiply complex numbers. So we're going to multiply by 4. So this is going to be negative 8 plus 12i. Over here we're going to FOIL. So we have 8 plus 6i minus 4i minus 3i squared. So those are some things we need to put together. We need to put this together. So that's going to be 2i. And we need to discuss what's I squared. Well, remember, I is the square root of negative 1. I squared is negative 1. Think about it this way. If you have the square root of 5 and you square that, you get 5. It's the same idea. So this piece right here is negative 3 times negative 1, which is positive 3. Positive 3 and 8 is 11. So there's your answer. Over here, we need to multiply. So we're going to multiply 3 times 3 is 9. That's going to be negative 6i. That's going to be 6i. It's going to be negative 4i squared. Try to use the eraser. There we go. Oops. I'm not trying to do that. So it's negative 4i squared. So notice the i's are going to cancel. What's negative 4i squared? Negative 4i squared. Oops. Whoa. I'm crazy. Negative 4i squared is positive 4. Because this is negative 1. Negative 4 times negative 1 is 4. So when you add all that up, it's 13. These are what we're going to call conjugate pairs here in a minute. Now I need to write this out twice. And then we need to multiply. So I get 9 from the first. Then the outer terms gives me 6i. The inner terms give me 6i. The last gives me 4i squared. So seeing the i's, that's going to give me 12i. What does this give me? That is equal to negative 4. Because this is negative 1 times 4 is negative 4. Add those together. 9 and negative 4 is 5. dividing by complex numbers. So what you do is you need to multiply the top and the bottom by the conjugate of the bottom. So the conjugate, you look at the bottom, it's 1 plus I. The conjugate is 1 minus I. Okay, so you multiply on the top, and you just get 1 minus I, because there's just a 1 on the top there, so it doesn't do anything. On the bottom, we're going to multiply. We're going to put these in parentheses if it makes your eyes feel better. But you're going to get 1. You're going to get minus I plus I minus I squared. You get all that stuff on the bottom. So on the top, we're still going to have 1 minus I. What happens to the i's on the bottom? They go away. Well, what's negative I squared? So these go away. And then this is going to be 1 plus 1. Because this is negative I squared. So it's negative 1, negative. It's the opposite of negative 1. So then you just have a 2 on the bottom. So there's your answer. Over here, I'm going to write this out here a little larger so we can see it a little better. So I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom by the conjugate of the bottom. Notice you're just changing the sign on the bottom. So when I do that, I'm going to get 8. And again, if you need to write parentheses, you can. 8 plus 4i plus 12i plus 6i squared. We'll simplify here in a minute. On the bottom, you're going to get 16 plus 8i minus 8i minus 4i squared. So we've got some simplifying to do. On the top, you're going to get a 16i from the 4 and the 12. This is going to be negative 6. And an 8 is a positive 2. Over here, the 8 i's cancel. This is going to be positive 4. So that's 20. Now before you're done, can you divide all three of these things by the same number? Yes, they are all divisible by 2. So divide this by 2. It's not 0, it's 1. Divide this by 2. Divide this by 2. And that turns out to be your answer. So now we got to do some combined operations down here in example 4. So we can't just take negative 3 times negative 12 and multiply. We have to pull out the negatives as i's first. So this is I square root of 3. This is 2i square root of 3. So you have to think of, how do I simplify the square root of 12? 12, forget about the negative. The negative was the I. 12 is 4 times 3. Square root of 4 is 2. Square root of 3 stays inside. Now you got to multiply. So we're going to have 2i squared times the square root of 9. Right, 3 times 3 is 9. So what happens? Well, this is going to be 2 times negative 1 times 3. Right? I squared is negative 1. So what's 2 times negative 1 times 3? Negative 6. Now we're going to do the same thing over here. We've got to simplify these radicals. So what perfect square goes into 48? And also the negative. So this is going to be I times the square root. Isn't it 16 times 3? Minus I times 9 times 3. Isn't that 27? So I'm pulling out the negative as I immediately, so it's out of the way, the inside. What is 16? The square root of 16 is 4, so this is 4i square root of 3. You can't bring the 3 out. Minus square root of 9 is 3. This is 3i square root of 3. Now, if it's the same root, you can put them together. If they were different roots, you could not. So what's 4i square root of 3 minus 3i square root of 3? It's just I square root of 3. You can write the 1 there, but you do not have to. Over here we have a binomial squared, so we're going to write it out twice. So we got a FOIL. So this is going to be positive 1. And then we take negative 1 times this. But before we do that, we may want to pull this negative out front and make it into an I. Probably should have done that earlier. Pull these out as i's before I multiply, but I caught it before I got too far in. So now we're going to do the outer term. So what's negative 1 times I square root of 3? Negative I square root of 3. And then the inner terms are negative I square root of 3. And then the outer terms are negative I squared square root of 9. And now we need to simplify. So these two are going to go together. They're going to become negative 2I square root of 3. You just add them together or subtract. This is the big deal. So what's negative I squared? This is going to be 3, and it's going to be just positive. This is negative 1, which is positive 1 times a 3. So then you're going to put a 1 and a 3 together, and you're going to make 4. And that is your answer there. Okay? All right, now we've got to solve some equations. This is why we need to know complex numbers. So this is x squared plus 4. You can just set x squared equal to negative 4. Subtract 4 on both sides. And then, once you've done that, you can take the square root of both sides. So you're going to get x equals, don't forget your plus or minus. What's the square root of negative 4? What's the square root of 4? 2. And the fact that there's a negative in there, it's I. Alright, so now we come over here and we see if we could factor it. I don't think it's going to factor because you have to multiply to 5 and multiply to 3. The signs are the same and you have to add or subtract to 2. I don't think you can add 5 and 3 anyway and get 2. So this sounds like a quadratic formula question. So if you recall, it's negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So we're going to have negative 2 plus or minus square root of negative 2 squared minus 4 times 3 times 5. And that's all over 2 times 3. So, negative 2 is positive 2. Don't forget your plus or minus. Still got our big square root. This is going to be 4.
Please excuse me for one brief announcement.
And then we're going to have to multiply 4 times 3 times 5. So 4 times 3 times 5, I believe, is what, negative 60? Well, it's negative. It's 60, but then there's a negative, a minus there. Right? 4 times 5 is 20, times 3 is 60. And then divided by 2 times 3 is 6. So now we're going to have 2 plus or minus square root of negative 56 all over 6. Now we just need to try to simplify. So I'm going to have 2 plus or minus. What's the square root of 56 simplify into? We'll run out of space. 56 is 4 times 14. So that's what the square root is going to simplify into. 4 times 14. So square root of 4 is 2. Bring out the negative as I. And you leave the 14 on the inside. And it's still all divided by 6. So one last thing to do. Divide by 2, divide by 2, divide by 2. You get 1 plus or minus I square root of 14 all over 3. If you have any questions, let me know.